is that better for society? Is that better for markets in general? Is that better for your 401k? You know, like these are all like philosophical economic debates that people have all the time and going on for years.
What do you need to ensure a really, really high throughput quality system for your end users? Welcome back to The Roll Up. We are your hosts. I'm Andy.
I'm Robbie, and this is your home to learn from the biggest guests, the brightest minds at the tip of innovation.
Our goal is to help spread the collective knowledge of everyone in our community.
We are breaking crypto out of its echo chamber and taking it to the real world.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy a quick word from some of our awesome partners who make this show possible. Crypto UX? Broken. AI? Can't trust it. Let Magic Newton set you free. It puts your on-chain transactions on autopilot. Does all the work for you 24/7 so you can go do what you want. The vision of Magic Labs, the creators of embedded wallets, used and backed by the best. See for yourself. Simpler crypto UX, verifiable AI agents. Newton.xyz. Introducing Asset Runes, the future of decentralized finance. Stablecoins natively on Bitcoin. Hedge against volatility. Diversify your portfolio. All directly from your Bitcoin wallet. Secured by ZK technology. This is Asset Runes. Available now, exclusively on Starknet. The infamous Rick and Morty, PFP in the building today.
Yeah.
James, it's good to have you in the city, man. It's been a long time coming. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, there's been a lot of conversations that you've taken part in on CT over the last couple of years, really, but also much more recently around Throughput. And this has like been a focus of our fund, of my research, of our podcast, just trying to identify ways to scale this ecosystem. And so this current idea that I think is shared amongst a lot of people, that is Throughput and UX are really bottlenecking the overall scale of the space. And you know, I think we can kind of keep cracking at those two things. We'll get to a better place with more adoption, et cetera. Obviously at Mantle Ad, you guys are trying to push the limits of Throughput at the infrastructure layer from the jump. So before we jump into Mantle Ad and all of these kind of different debates and conversations, I'd just like to get your perspective as to the state of high frequency trading, Throughput, and the infrastructure today, and kind of how you're seeing this landscape currently amongst L1s, L2s, apps, and let's just start to get a foundation of what the state of high throughput is in the space today.
I think kind of the genesis for me was the legalization of sports betting. And I remember like around COVID times, pre-COVID, you know, you would go to like the Newark train station and there'd be all these like posters, DraftKings and different things. And then COVID hit, right? And I took advantage of, you know, the work at home sort of thing to travel, spend time with family. And my cousins and you know, other relatives were into sports betting, and you know, like the stimulus check came out and all this sort of stuff. So I think during COVID, it kind of launched two sort of gambling realms. One was on crypto side, and the other was sports betting, right? And I just remember sitting like on the couch drinking a beer with like my cousins and stuff, and you know, my cousin would have like 3 different TVs. The games would be going. And have the phone open, we making bets in the middle of the game, that sort of thing. And that's kind of like the first use case that popped in my head for high throughput. As I was thinking of like a ton of people sitting at home with their cell phones, just like betting. Yeah. And I kind of also viewed that it would just go to this like degenerate case where you would just be betting like, are they going to get a first down? Are they going to, you know, all this sort of thing? The pass going to complete? Like, I could just imagine just
the
like.
Most like real time.
Yeah, just like thumb, just like, just like thumb pounding on the screen, sort of betting. Yeah. And that's kind of the case that, it just popped into my head of what could be on blockchain. And you start like thinking through numbers. How many people are sports betting? How many people place bets? How many bets would they want to place over some time period? And like, could the chain handle that? And the answer is no. You know, there was no chain really that could handle that. So if you think of, and it's also kind of bursty, like people bet all at once, and then you get a kind of a lull where there's nothing going on. And so, you can't even really like take the averages. It's more sort of like handle those peaks. So like, asynchronous execution is something that we have at Mana. It kind of came from that sort of like handling the peaks sort of thing where you can burst faster than the chain can actually go, and you can accumulate sort of thing. So, that was really my inspiration.
Yeah.
I'm not a big sports gambler myself, but just watching other people do it and participating a little bit kind of inspired me of like, what would this look like on chain?
Yeah, that's actually ironically playing into this broader idea from this guy, Good Alexander on Twitter. He's got this like post-fiat concept, and he's been writing a lot about AI doom, and I think there's two kind of there's two pathways happening. One is just the speculation or the speculation and the financialization of a lot of things at once. And then at the same time, just like the world kind of going towards a more like I call it like degenification. But sports betting is kind of in the middle of this. But the core idea is that people are going to want to interact globally with people, whether on a chain or not, at a very, very high rate. And the state of things in the on-chain world is just barely getting there now.
Yeah, you mentioned AI as well. AI agents is another sort of thing that would require high throughput. People have been talking about that for decades.
Yeah,
where, like agents are interacting with each other on behalf of some human.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing that can just like multiply the amount of volume of transactions beyond what even humans can do themselves. So
yeah, I mean, I think that we've seen this idea around throughput being a bottleneck, and I have throughput and UX is kind of my core parameter. Do you think that throughput is something that is solved, in the span of this next couple years, right? Is it a longer term thing? Like maybe you could just walk us through how you see this evolution playing out with some of the earlier stage. You had the Ethereums, you had the L1s, L2s. Monad's coming out soon. Now, we're going to get 100x improvement of throughput. But where do we go in the next couple years? Is that going to be, kind of like where we end up?
Well, I think like every action has some value, some economic value or societal value, and the more frequent something is, the less likely that individual thing sort of has a lot of value. There's not $1 billion transfers happening all day long, right? There's like a few here and there or whatever. Yeah. So, but there's a lot of like low dollar transfers, $3, $5. Somebody buys an ice cream cone at McDonald's, it's like $3 or something. So I think there's going to be some equilibrium by which the cost, the security of those transactions like meets the value, and that's kind of like where things will stabilize. So will everything be on chain? No, because it's just not like economically worth it to put it on chain. You don't need that security. Do I need to put like every time I turn my light switches on and off like on chain? I know some people will say like, oh, the electric company, we should record everyone's electric usage or something, on chain, but that's not really like worth it. So there is going to be some sort of equilibrium, and I think you're going to have, it's just basic economics, supply and demand of blockchain space with what people want to do and whether they value that security. If they value that security, then they'll pay for it, and the supply of blockchain space will grow to meet that demand.
A lot of that demand in the last couple of months has came from, Hyperliquid's done a great job of doing no KYC perps on chain, right? Whether it's decentralized or whatever you want to call that is a different story. But I think there are clear pockets of that demand. Now, it might not be light switches, it might not be every text message, but there's going to be this kind of, as you say, this economic equilibrium for where you as a person will want to have some sort of guarantees in your daily life, specifically around your financial life. Now, coming to some of these areas of demand, recently Crypto Twitter has discovered Clobs. I put a tweet out saying that they were one of the most important new DeFi innovations since Uniswap got absolutely memed to hell for that one. Yeah. When I say new, I mean that the infrastructure is getting there to actually support them.
Right.
And I think that's particularly interesting. So I know that you guys have quite a few Clobs that are being built on Monad. I'm curious what you think is the ideal base layer for a high performant exchange, like a central limit order book. Is what you guys are doing complementary to something like a single specialized chain like Hyperliquid? Where do you see the ideal setting for something like a Clob?
Yeah, well, everything is trade-offs, right? So you're trading one thing for another. Like, what are you optimizing for, right? I think typically when people talk about Clobs, they're talking about like market makers. Like, you need liquidity. What are the market makers going to come with the liquidity? Like, what's ideal for the market maker? Being able to have tight spreads. What's good for a market maker to be able to do that? So you have some, people say, okay, we prioritize cancels over fills, or there's all these different sorts of ways of trying to do that. And then you have just like in your traditional exchange, like CME, you have an FPGA, which is just time stamping all the incoming orders, and then on the back end system they get sorted, and cancels or orders, whatever, they get sorted and executed that way. So it's all sort of like purely time based. I've tweeted, like L2 should just sell data center space, right? Like so like if that's what you're kind of optimizing for.
What does that mean?
Well, like exchanges make a lot of money just from selling data center space. They make money by connectivity, right? And so if you have a place that is latency sensitive and people want to trade there, they'll pay to get closer to that thing, and they have better connectivity. They'll pay for all different sorts of things, right? And it's always a balance, like, at HFT firm, do we have 10 lines connecting or do we have 20? Are we actually saturating those 10 lines, or are those 10 lines good enough for bursty sort of situations that it's not worth paying for the 20 lines, because the exchange is going to charge you for all that? And so you got this like fixed cost of your sort of monthly stuff, and then your trading revenue, and you kind of like do the numbers, accounting numbers, and you say like, is it worth it, sort of thing. And if we added 2 more lines, would we make more money? So there's all these sort of games you play in HFT to like optimize this stuff. There's always sort of inconsistencies within the exchanges, internal technology stacks, and you're trying to optimize for that and play these sort of latency games. But it just really goes to like what you're optimizing for. So is there a way to get liquidity without like the best systems? Of course, there's really shitty centralized exchanges. Crypto exchanges have been known to be terrible compared to traditional market sort of exchanges. And there's still a lot of exchanges in the world that are using 20-year-old software that's not that good, and there's a lot of variance, and that's really frustrating when you're trying to like, why did my cancel come before the order? Well, they actually have all this like priority inversion in their system that like it's not. So you can still have a ton of demand, you can still have a ton of liquidity with a relatively poorly designed system. There's other ways sort of incentivizing certain behavior. CME will give, for a new product, will give credits, right? And so there were a lot of times at Jump we ran a trading strategy that lost money, but we were net positive because CME was basically paying us to make the market, right? So there's all these sorts of like...
Nice little rebate.
Yeah, there's rebates, right? Rebates is a big deal especially for new products. And then over time, as the market gets more efficient, it gets more activity, those rebates, they slowly kind of like take those away. But I think there's a lot of different things that go into whether a market is successful. Do you need to be like CME to be successful? No, you don't, because there aren't very many CMEs in the world. There's like Eurex. There's a couple of exchanges that are like at that level where they're like FPGAs, time stamping stuff, and you're down to single digit nano sort of thing. You got people cutting cable lengths, trying to make them the same length. Like you can take it to that extreme, but there's plenty of markets that are not that. That technology advanced that do fine and have tons of trading activity. So,
from your past experience, what are the parts of a really quality trading system? Like, what do you need to ensure a really, really high throughput quality system for your end users?
On the exchange side,
Yeah.
you mean? Yeah, I mean, it's. I
What I'm
think
trying to understand is basically like what makes a certain system far better than a different system. Like, what are the parts that matter the most? Because then I'm trying to like understand how you guys have optimized your base layer architecture to optimize for those parts that matter versus other ways.
Well, I think a lot of it just comes down to the higher sort of like UX, like having, streaming sort of data. Any of that sort of stuff is necessary to even build an automated trading strategy to begin with.
Yeah.
But there's differences obviously between a decentralized system like Monad, where you don't. Well, in the current case, you do know where the next leader is going to be, but it could be, it could be all over the world somewhere.
Yeah.
And a centralized system that's like a centralized exchange or L2 or something, the single sequencer. So, is it easier for a market maker in that case to compete on latency? It is, because they can just say, okay, I know that server is in
that location.
This location in Singapore. I'm going to put my server next to it. I'm going to find the data center that has the best connectivity and put my server next to it. And so, that makes life easier from that perspective. If you had a decentralized chain where you had a significant stake in Europe, significant stake in like Northeast U.S. sort of thing, then you have to put two servers if you want to kind of race those sort of games, or you start getting into the sort of secondary services like MEV or that sort of thing, where you're paying basically to get in front of other people. But yeah, everything's kind of just trade-offs, and in a decentralized system, we're intentionally trying to be globally distributed.
Okay, so you put out a post arguing about how L2s are kind of fighting over pre-comps and really trying to get block times as low as possible. 100 milliseconds, 10, 1, and then kind of going all the way back to the data center argument, and then with your thought around basically single sequencers being like a centralized system. So of course, if you're trading on those venues and you're very close to where that sequencer is with a highly performant data center, you'll have an advantage over everyone else. In a more kind of decentralized L1 setup, you've got this globally distributed set of validators, which forces basically more competition or higher threshold to actually be able to be closer to like the core stake, like where geographically that is. When you introduce sequencer co-location into this from an L2 perspective, you start to get a little bit closer to where Monad will be, but you still trade off the pure sense, the pure like amount of stake and validators in exchange for still faster performance. I think that it will be better to have these high performance applications on something like that than on a L1 with a need to have redundancy baked into the consensus. Obviously, you don't feel that way. But when this Derby race was going on Twitter, which was kind of funny, it was all these different L2s and Solana and Monad testnets and a couple others, and like obviously the L2s that were just a single sequencer and just extremely juiced up were like first and second. So I guess it's going to come down to like what the users actually care about, or what trade-offs you're willing to accept as a builder. So I guess the question then is, what you guys are essentially trading off is like, is the shared state of this globally decentralized L1 that is worth it more, that the composability that you get is worth more, and having to achieve that consensus is worth more than having just a single sequencer co-located, or 3 sequencers, 4 sequencers across the world in its own kind of silo or isolated environment with higher throughput or higher performance as a result of the setup. And so that's basically the decision that you guys have made, and you're going to bring that to the market.
First of all, Monad isn't designed for a club.
Okay.
Like, it's not. It's a general purpose blockchain similar to Ethereum or Solana.
Yeah.
So we didn't say, let's build a blockchain that's a club.
But
otherwise we would have built
right?
Hyperliquid. Right?
Yeah.
We could have built Hyperliquid instead, right?
Yeah.
So we chose not to build Hyperliquid. We chose to build something else. So, I think there's two. We talk about like UX, like user experience for
Right.
as a retail trader, let's say.
Yeah.
Like you care, you click the button and you want to see the order filled,
Yeah,
right?
immediately.
Yeah. So
There's no way.
what's human perceptible sort of thing for that? I think with some of the changes I outlined in that one Twitter post that was response to the Derby,
Yeah.
like you can get that down to a couple hundred milliseconds, right? And
Yeah.
so can a user really
Tell? Right.
tell? I don't think they can.
No,
So
market makers could, but again, you're not optimizing for something like
so
that.
the market, so then we go to the market maker. So what can the users tell from the market makers? Well, okay, so then we get to like, is there a lot of liquidity, right?
Yeah.
Like if I go to the book and there's no liquidity, and I remember this from when I used to trade different coins. Well, I haven't recently, but you go to the book and you're like, there's no liquidity here. Like there's like one token at this price, two tokens at that price. There's nothing there. Like it wouldn't take very many dollars for me to just like sweep multiple levels of this book, right? And that's not the way it should be. Like there should be a lot of liquidity there. So, and then it's the spread, the width of the book, and how much is it paying me to aggress to cross the book, right? And so. How much am I paying to aggress?
Yes.
And that's kind of like what users see. So if you're trading shitcoins, do you care about any of that? Probably not.
Yeah, no.
Right? Like you're buying that coin, you're buying that meme coin, hoping that it's going to 10x or 100x.
Yeah.
Do you care if you pay like a 3% spread versus a 1% spread? Like you just don't give a shit. Like,
You
you're not
probably don't care about the 100 millisecond difference or 50 millisecond difference.
Yeah. I mean, you just don't. You're hoping for so much more gain than what you're paying in fees that you just don't really care.
Yeah.
And people trade on the centralized exchanges, and those have terrible sort of fees and spreads. They just don't care at all, right? Like, I can't believe that people even trade on these centralized exchanges. Like, it boggles my mind. Like, why don't you? I understand there's a UX thing, custody, and other sorts of things that make it nice for the average sort of retail person. But as a trader, I can't imagine a real trader would ever trade on some of these exchanges. It's just terrible. And especially if you go through the basic sort of interface, which is just
that's a scam.
It's a total scam, right?
The fees are terrible.
The fees are terrible. Spread's terrible. Everything's terrible. There's people buying Bitcoin on Fidelity. Like the spread is, I think they charge like 1% or something. Like this stuff is just terrible, but people do it. So I think where is sort of the depth of book and the width and all this sort of come into play? It comes into sort of the majors, the BTC, the ETH, these sort of things, the futures, where there's more size. So that stuff matters more there than sort of the shit coins.
Yeah.
And meme coins or whatever. And, so then that question is for the users, like, well, how do you get, as we already discussed, how do you get market makers to put liquidity there?
Right.
Like, how do you get them to put liquidity? How do you get them to quote tightly? And so, if one way is to say, we have this centralized server. You can put your HFT firm, you can put your server right next to the centralized server.
Yeah.
And you will guarantee beat all the retail people who come in to aggress, when they see the news tick, right? And then you're going to be able to cancel all your orders because you're so fast. And then you get into this game though, with like, you get a quant trading firm that comes in and they put their server next to it, and now it's the fight between the quant trading firm, which has these sort of like aggressive strategies, and the other ones which have passive strategies. And they're fighting each other based on this latency game. And that game is a race to single-digit nanoseconds. That's where that leads. That's fine. Like Jump has made a lot of money off winning single-digit nanosecond races. Jump is a very successful firm at trading at CME because we have all that technology, all that hardware. Is that better for society? Is that better for markets in general? Is that better for your 401k? Like these are all like philosophical economic debates that people have all the time and going on for years, right? So, so going back to the sort of decentralized system like Monad, can you create a Clob on Monad that reaches the level of liquidity and sort markets that you want, that people find it's valuable enough for them? if it's a difference between a spread of 1% or 0.85%, like, do people really care? Probably not. So I think there is some threshold there.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is what, Tully talks about this. A lot of people talk about this
He's
stuff.
been in the trenches.
There's a lot of people that talk about what are different ways we can accomplish this, right?
All these ideas just keep getting taken to their logical extremes. Like it's just going to keep happening. You know, okay, we're just going to push everything to the limit of like being on chain, but bringing it all the way to like the least amount of validators, the most amount of speed, and then all the way to the other side as well. So I'd like to talk about some of the economic stuff as well, but one last thought around kind of like this latency stuff is I think that people are under-indexing on latency and over-indexing on like block times, or like over-indexing on TPS and these types of metrics. I think that's been something that's been a little bit misconstrued. Perhaps you could like unpack and educate us as to why latency matters in these systems more than some of these other terms that are more popular per se. Or just maybe like what the ramifications of latency is in these trading systems. I feel like we've covered it pretty well, but just want to get a firm understanding. Introducing SummerFi, one of DeFi's oldest and most battle-tested platforms. SummerFi automates your exposure to DeFi's highest quality yield, so you can sit back and enjoy this summer. Deposit stablecoins like USDC or USDT and let SummerFi route your funds into optimized, low-risk lending strategies. With over 100 million in instant liquidity and support for over 34 protocols across Ethereum, Arbitrum, and more, you always stay in control. Choose from a wide range of curated strategies reviewed by independent risk experts, all in just a few clicks. So why work hard for your yield when you can be lazy? Start earning now at summer.fi, the home of the lazy summer protocol.
Innovating finance, global, institutional, and on-chain. Deep liquidity to drive capital efficiency. Now maximize yields on institutional-grade liquid staking with METH. Unlock $1 trillion of capital via Bitcoin. All of this secured by Mantle's treasury of billions in stables and ETH capital pools. This entire ecosystem is coordinated by a vast network of seasoned VCs that are aiming to create the next generation of banking and financial technology. This is Mantle.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about performance. Performance is like a general word. There's different ways of measuring performance. One is throughput. Throughput is, like how many transactions you can do per second on average or something, right? You could have a system that produces one block every hour.
Ethereum?
But that block
Bitcoin?
has like, trillions of transactions in it. Yeah. And so by definition, that chain would have the highest throughput. There's this old sort of joke, you could load up a semi-truck of hard drives, drive it across the United States, and it'd still be faster than like sending that data over fiber from one coast to the other, right? And it has very high latency, but it has extremely high throughput. I don't know if that's true anymore, but it was years ago when people used to run this mental exercise. So that's your TPS. So that to me goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning was like sports gambling. Like you have 10,000 people who want to place a bet right now, right? They're not on individual basis. They're not concerned about latency. They just want to place a bet right now. So you need that sort of throughput. On latency, I don't think, again, for retail traders, it doesn't matter that much, right? Okay. It's a UX, you don't need to execute the trade faster than the person can actually click the mouse. Like that's just silly.
Right. Or faster than your brain can process the information.
Right. Yeah.
So in the latency world, though, there's a concept called jitters, right? Where there's like a discrepancy sometimes in the performance of a given distributed network based on something. Could you explain that idea of like jitters and like how Monad is set to basically reduce the amount of variance in transaction processing time?
Well, the transaction processing time for Monad right now is basically fixed at 500 milliseconds. That's what I said in that post. So even though the system can run much faster, it's 500 milliseconds to one round of communication.
Yes.
So I'm not sure. Are you talking about like I'm in New York and the leader is bouncing around the world? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
or?
and then like on a given, like let's say on a given day, there's different spikes in terms of how long it takes for information to be propagated from different like validators to each other, or from different nodes. And so like the goal is to try to reduce the variance to be able to give validators and users like a very clean average of like, okay, here's what you can expect.
Yeah, so we're not really trying. Right now, it is consistent just because of that minimum thing that we have. But you know, if you're sitting in New York and 30% of the stake is in New York for Monad, then 30% of the time you're going to have the best possible connectivity to the leader.
Yeah.
But you have a block time. Like it's not. The time that a leader receives transactions and then builds a block and sends it is not instantaneous, right? Like there is a window over which it's receiving, and then people try to play timing games like, I want to wait till the last possible millisecond to get my transaction in because I've got more information at that time, and so, but yeah, there's I think a general sort of assumption is like if I'm in New York and you're in New York, and the next leader happens to be in Singapore, I guess we're equally matched, right? Like, you're going to send your cancel, I'm going to send my aggressive order, and whatever happens. But this is in that sense it's fair. Now, if I'm sitting in New York and you're sitting in Singapore, and like Tully gives examples, right? Like, okay, the information comes out of Singapore, well, then you have an advantage because you're going to get your thing in. But things are not in traditional markets. Things are ordered by time, like CME timestamps orders and cancels as they come in, and they're fair in that sense, in that time sense. His blockchain doesn't really work that way because you have block builders and they accept bribes and other sorts of things, and so there's other ways of sort of dealing with this latency, anyways.
All right, so I'd like to kind of pull out of the technical side and move towards some of the economic stuff that is particularly interesting to the current meta per se, but also to the state of how to think about the economics for users and validators and developers as well of applications. And so one thing that's obviously been a concept of valuing these kind of L1s has been REV. Right, real economic value, and a lot of that is actually generated by MEV going to validators. And there's a bit of like an incentive misalignment issue between the validators of like, let's say Solana and like Jupiter, the team, or like Pump.Fun, right? Like, there's a lot of leakage of value from these applications on their base layer chain to the validators. The counter argument is obviously that, if you weren't on the chain, you wouldn't have any value. Mm-hmm. Right? Pump.Fun went from Blast, I think, or was it Blast or some L2, and they moved to Solana. It was like boom. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious how you think about applications on Monad, and perhaps if this leads into like the future of will apps on L1s consistently have some sort of application-specific sequencing or some sort of ordering logic for their own application that they can then either return that value to themselves or to their users, or just kind of how you're thinking about that economic incentive game for apps on Monad and just L1s in general.
Yeah, if an app doesn't value the chain, it won't be there, right? It'll be somewhere else. So,
right, but it's more like symbiotic than that. It's like you help each other.
Yeah, you have to make this sort of decision, and it's some game theory decision as well, sort of thing, right? And like I wasn't aware of the Pump.Fun thing. I thought they were on base at some point, but was that before or after? I'm not really sure, but
they moved from some app. It was some L2, and they went to Solana and it just went boom.
I think first, even in a fixed fee sort of space, like AWS is not the cheapest cloud to host your stuff, right? Yeah. So why do people still stay with AWS? Why don't they go for the absolute cheapest? What are they getting from that? You know, are they getting stability? Are they getting uptime? Are they getting something else? So there's that aspect. At a sort of even a fixed fee level, you have that sort of thing. But application specific sequencing, absolutely, I think that's a big part of it. That'll solve some of these latency games that you see as well, right?
Yeah.
If the app says a block is invalid because there was a cancel after an aggressive order, then the validator is incentivized to play along with that sort of game. Otherwise, the validator loses that app business altogether as well. So I almost kind of see this in traditional in the trad world. It's just these are negotiations, right?
Yeah,
People you get some people in the room and they negotiate over like how this is all going to work together.
Yeah, but it just happens on chain.
But you don't have that. You don't have that on chain. So you kind of have these games. And
so then maybe the question is like, is there a economic point in which an application would have more like would have the negotiating strength to come to Monad and be like, hey guys, like we're driving this much value.
Yeah, I think
like how do you think about that?
I think chains should have sort of generalized frameworks by which these contracts and intents can be specified and executed and enforced.
Yeah. And
so that's something I've been thinking a lot about recently.
Tell us about it. Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much because it's not built out yet. But, it's like what we're saying, like an app has a specific sort of requirement. A validator desires the business of that app, or the chain desires the business of the app.
Yeah.
I mean, the validator could always just say, I'm not going to include your transactions at all.
Right.
Anybody who interacts with this contract, screw you, go talk to the next guy.
Yeah.
But if there's some balance there by which the app gets what it wants in terms of its specific sequencing and inclusion and other sorts of rules, and the validator gets what it wants, which is the fee revenue from people using that app, then they can find that sort of equilibrium. Yeah. And how do you express this and execute this sort of contract? It's not really a contract, but it's sort of agreement programmatically, right? And building a framework that allows you to do that, I think, is like the next generation of this stuff. And so I've been thinking a lot about that sort of recently, like how to build something like that.
It's an economic game theoretical scenario, but it also comes down to like off-chain stuff, right? Like BD and vibes and stuff that is like not just purely economic, but at the end of the day, like there's this populist movement right now, obviously, right? Infra to apps, Infra's dead. Infra's not cool anymore, James. Right? Apps are the only cool thing. James.
Well, I think that's just
my head took too long. And Infra's dead.
Yeah,
sorry. Right before Mainnet.
I think people are burnt out on Infra just because a lot of Infra hasn't been innovative. And it's just like, oh, we got another one. Oh, we got another one. And Infra is just, they've also been, I've said in some of my tweets, like one-trick ponies, right? Yeah. Like, especially going back to like 2017, 2018, 2019 era, especially, it was just like these guys came up with this one little improvement to a consensus algo, and that, somehow led to an entire new chain. Yeah. And why? It's not really their fault. It's the people. It's the people that go along with it and throw their money at that thing's fault, right? Like, if you could convince somebody that this new shoestring for shoes is awesome, and people were
launch a whole new shoe collection.
Yeah, launch a whole new company like Nike, and people give you billions of dollars for that little shoestring event. Like why wouldn't you? Right. So, it's that sort of. FOMO, or I think a lot of it just comes from people not really understanding technology and like what this thing really does. Like I said about that Derby game, for example, it's something that an average person can kind of understand. Yeah. But that's not really a good.
No, but you look at it and it makes Monad look bad.
It makes Monad look bad, but it's not. Well, there was one that failed, and there was one that like had like terrible latency. But like if that is your level of thinking, you probably shouldn't be investing in technology at all, right? Yeah. Like you need to go a lot deeper than a horse taking steps across the.
I mean, it's good marketing.
Screen. It's good marketing for them, yeah. And it did. Competition is good, and it did generate some discussions within the team, and we talked about some of these. Well, the thing I told you, that vote pacing mechanism, right, which slows the chain down intentionally, but. Infra is not. People are burnt out on infra. It's not that infra innovation is dead. No. There's going to be a ton more infra innovation, a ton more. Yeah. But people are burnt out because there's just been so many Very, very small delta improvements.
Yeah, marginal improvements. For
very, very marginal improvements
Yeah.
that raise tons of money and get dumped on retail and all that sort of stuff. And, what's that George Bush quote? Shame me once, shame me twice. Like, people just get like, I can only take this abuse so many times, so many times sort of thing. And so I don't think infra's dead. I think people are just burnt out on infra, and it's just because of the past has not been efficient at all.
So when you guys are leading up to Mainnet here, how are you feeling about the application ecosystem for Monad? If we're thinking about this from like an L1 perspective, right? There's a lot of similar DeFi applications. You got your DEXs, your lending, etc. Are you seeing the technology that you've built allow for new ideas that are being built on chain, or kind of, do you have any cool ideas of what you'd want to build on the chain? And also, I mean, this is like three questions in one here, but there's a new trend of like teams wanting to just dog food their own tech and being like, look, I'm just going to build the thing that I know that my tech is really good for. Right, so let's just say like I'm a DA layer. I'm just gonna build execution, build a really high performance chain, or like I'm an app. I'm just gonna build a chain for that and just go right. Just kind of like flip flopping the way people think of just internally dog fooding their own chain. Curious if you guys are doing anything specifically for the chain from like the internal team, like the lab side, or just how you're feeling about the application ecosystem more broadly.
First of all, I'm a lab, so I'm not, I'm not building. I'm not a BD guy, so
of course.
But you have your sort of like blue chip apps that already exist on other chains. People kind of expect those to be there, so you get them to sort of build on your chain as well. Not build, but deploy on your chain as well. And there's just a ton of BD that happens. Like we have USDC and launching, and we have a lot of other sort of like blue chip sort of DeFi stuff there. But is that going to bring somebody from like Ethereum over to Monad? Like they expect it to be. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition, right? And so you have to have something that's like sort of makes people energetic. And there are teams that are building new stuff. We do have Clobs teams. We have some games. We have some other stuff that's sort of innovative, social media, social financialization stuff. Which, but I think sports betting, we got that as well. I think one thing that I kind of learned when I was at Jump, building for Solana, is just like developer support. And I've always said from the very beginning of Monad that like one of the most important things is for the team that's working on the core technology to work with the app teams to help make sure their stuff is optimized and running performance. Their expertise is presumably in the thing that the area they're building, but so they might be experts in trading, or they might be experts in sports betting or whatever, but they're not maybe experts in like, how can I optimize this app to run as fast as possible on a blockchain? And so I think that's like, that collaboration needs to be there. Frankly, we haven't done a great job of that as much as, well, I'm usually harder on myself than other people are hard on me, but like, so, we're working more recently trying to get more involved with the teams, make sure, and there's a lot of stuff that's on-chain, but also off-chain, right? A lot of these apps have off-chain components, data, statistics, automated processes. They have off-chain components that sit there as well, and those need to be performant, and how do those interact with the chain, what's the RPC, all that sort of stuff. So that has all been a learning lesson for me. I always focused on the chain and not on the integration piece, and that really hurt us when we first launched testnet, because our RPC had terrible performance and other sorts of things, and it might not still be even that great. We're still working on it, but we've started rolling out things where allow much higher in performance sort of integration, and that from the app teams, we're getting a lot of like good reviews. Like they're very happy with that sort of work, and so. It's something that I always knew from the beginning that I wanted to do and had to do, and then we just didn't get time to do it. Yeah. And now we're trying to play catch up on that side of things.
I think a lot of the infra block explorers, RPCs, indexers, These are the things that they need to catch up to the high throughput chains, actually.
Yeah, it's both. It's and the old sort of methods that they use. Some will pull like the RPC for the block and download the entire block. Like that just doesn't work in a high performance chain.
Yes.
You need a streaming set of events coming from another process to your Explorer and indexing. And so there is that. There's a lot of just technical sort of back end problems that need to be solved.
We're going to wrap this one up by playing James reacts to his own tweets. Is that all right with you?
Sure.
Most things are only interesting because they're unfamiliar. Relationships. Try to find someone that you still find interesting after they are familiar. Interesting.
Yeah. What do you want me to say? I mean, it's true, right? Like dating. You've been dating. You know, you go and meet somebody, and like they're different than the last boyfriend or girlfriend you had, and so you find them really interesting, and then 3 months later, 6 months later, you're like, this person's boring as fuck, so I'm getting out of here, and you go on to the next one, right?
So find things that remain interesting over time and stick with them.
Yeah, I think you just need to distinguish the difference between something that's actually interesting and something that's just unfamiliar
and new and novel.
And people often confuse those two concepts, and they're interpreting unfamiliar as interesting, and that's just...
Are there good examples of automated slashing that were truly from malicious behavior as opposed to incompetence, such as accidentally running two nodes with the same key? Did you find anything in there?
No, I don't think I really found anything interesting. So we were thinking about this, right? Like a node starts behaving in a Byzantine behavior.
Right.
And like what is the likely cause of that?
Yeah, just like you fucked up or like you're trying to actually do something wrong.
Right. Or the team that wrote the software, which in this case happens to be Category Labs, fucked up, right? And so we're sitting there thinking, okay, we're going to implement slashing, and like maybe this node, this validator does something wrong.
Yeah.
And we're going to take money away from the validator company or the delegators that delegate to that. And then we come back later and we find out it was really a fuck up on Category Labs. Software developer made a mistake. And now what do you do, right? So, you know, we've had these issues in trading and banking and other stuff where we made errors and we had customers and we screwed up. And, you know, there were several times I remember Goldman literally wrote them a check, right? It literally mailed them a check.
Yeah.
And is that what we're going to do here? So, you know, I know... I've seen threads with Tolly about Solana and automate. You know, Solana doesn't have automated slashing, if I know correctly, and you know, relies on some sort of social. But if you have automated, like, what is the likely case that what is likely cause of something going wrong? Well, somebody misconfigures something, right?
Yeah.
There's been that case where people have spun up two validators with the same private key. Or there's a code bug, or they're actually trying to do something malicious. The malicious thing is far less likely than the other two, right? And so does automated slashing really make sense in that regime?
That's interesting. Another interesting one here from you is around the NYSE. The IDGAF chain, the I don't give a fuck chain, single sequencer, IDGAF, Ponzonomics, copy-paste code, misleading tech, sketchy MMD deals, multi-sig with two friends, centralized RWA, DM to Angel. A little bit of satire here.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't give a fuck, then you don't give a fuck. Why bother with anything, right? Like, you know, there's this. Just be honest. Like, I don't give a fuck.
Just
You're here to play with Ponzi's,
but you can't
come to my chain and play with Ponzi's, and we'll Ponzi together.
So you're saying just be honest.
Just I don't give a fuck. Like, why not? Like, all these games to pretend like you're something other than you're not.
Yeah.
And who are you fooling? You're not fooling the smart people in the room.
No.
The smart people who are probably sociopaths will still invest with you because they know that the dumb people in the room are going to believe you, right?
You slaughter them. Yeah. You wrote that those with good credit are not spending 2-3% between consumer and merchant. All my cards are 2% cash rebate. The cost is 1 to 1.5%, and you get a lot of benefits from that. This was in reference to how crypto has not yet won in consumer to business payments. It seems like a very easy, obvious use case. Like, let's just plug in stable coins, right? But there seems to be just there's drawbacks towards blockchain-based payments when it comes to the benefits that you get from like a credit card.
A problem you have in crypto sort of marketing and thought leadership is just sort of disingenuous behavior, right? And you're like, oh, we could replace this with a stablecoin payment, and save 2 or 3%, and that's just not true. Like, you're just lying, right?
Yeah.
Now, are you lying because you're dumb and you don't understand how credit cards and all that stuff really works, or are you lying because you have some investment in?
Yeah.
I guess you didn't have investment until Circle until now, but maybe now you do. But like, why are you lying?
Yeah.
So there's a ton of services with credit cards. The net between me and a merchant is like 1%. I always go for the 2% cash back, except for like hotel rewards, that sort of thing. And so the net is probably 1%, and I'm getting value from that 1%. If I were to switch to stablecoin payments, it would be for like the McDonald's ice cream cone that we talked about.
Yeah.
I would do a stablecoin payment for that because there's no real economic value there. Like, if they give me if the ice cream tastes rotten or it falls on the ground or whatever, like, I don't give a shit. It's $3, right? Yeah. But am I gonna switch to a stablecoin payment for a new $3,000 TV? I'm not, because I want to be able to call American Express and say, Costco just screwed me over on this TV, or Best Buy screwed me over on this TV, and they refuse to take it back, and I'm going to get that refund. So you're buying sort of insurance, that's socialized amongst other credit card users.
Correct.
So to pretend that you can swap one, apples to oranges comparison is what I should actually say.
Yes.
Super popular in crypto. Everyone loves to compare apples to oranges and act like, oh, this thing's better than the other one. Dude, you're not the same thing. You're not even comparing fairly. So, that was that tweet.
James, I appreciate your time today. It's been a fun conversation, technical, economic, fun stuff. So I appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.